Sigrid McCauley was Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, and she joins me now. It's great to have you in the program. I really appreciate you joining us. First, I just want to ask you the same question that my colleague Hallie Jackson asked the family, which was just your reaction to hearing that exchange in Air Force One with the president when he talks about Epstein stealing people. He doesn't like when they steal, and then someone asking specifically about Ms. Giuffre and him saying, "Oh yeah, I think it was her." How did that strike you?
I think it was really jarring. I mean, you saw the family and how upsetting that can be. The loss of Virginia is very real. It's very recent. And she was a champion for these survivors. She was somebody who went up against pure evil, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and took them down. And it took her years to do that. So I think sort of the flippant nature of that comment, wasn't well received, as you can imagine, because everybody's just so raw right now, missing her and, wishing that had never happened.
What kind of toll did it take on your client to wage this battle for as long as she did? I was sort of looking back through research in preparation for this interview. It was just striking, like, how much civil litigation there was. And then there was a criminal case about Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, just basically constant for years.
Her strength was truly tremendous. I mean, it's remarkable the courage she had. She started with her initial case against Ghislaine Maxwell, that her courage, her strength, her work resulted in Epstein being put in prison, Jean-Luc Brunel being put in prison, Maxwell being put in prison. And of course, she was supported by a chorus of other survivors who were fighting for that same justice. But it really is tremendous. We had the settlement for a class of survivors just this past year against two financial institutions with significant remuneration. The fact that she was brave enough to stand up and say, this has to stop. This should never have happened. But I'm not going to stop working until we put them in prison. And that's exactly what she did.
And now, of course, we're watching in slow motion the lawyer for Ghislaine Maxwell essentially, without saying it, ask for a pardon. The number two at the Department of Justice, including the man who was the president's former criminal lawyer, interviewing her for 2 consecutive days. The president saying he hadn't thought about a pardon, which is things he said before about other people he's given pardons to. What does the specter of a possible presidential pardon for this woman mean for you?
It would really be, in our history, the most significant travesty of justice. I mean, this is a known sex offender of young children, and the president would be allowing her some form of reduced sentence, or even worse, letting her out. I mean, it just simply cannot happen. The American public has to rise up and do what's right and say, we will not allow this. She is pure evil. She hurt many, many young lives. I mean, the 4 young, brave souls who gave testimony during that criminal trial were just a fraction of the hundreds and hundreds of young girls that she victimized. Those were just the minors, but there were girls just a few days shy of 18 who she similarly ruined lives. So this is somebody who perpetrated crimes for many, many years. She should not see outside the walls of that prison.
There's a lot of talk about, transparency, the release of the files, a lot of back and forth, I think, understandably about, what that would mean, who might be hurt by it, whether the survivors themselves, most crucially, would have their privacy protected, what other people totally incidental to the crimes at issue would have their reputation tarnished. How do you think your client, Virginia Giuffre, saw that? I have a sense from her family. And how do you see it?
Well, she's been fighting for that for many years. In her original case against Ghislaine Maxwell, we just got an appeal back from the Second Circuit most recently. We've been fighting for years and years to try to uncover the information that was sealed in that case. We contend wrongfully sealed. So that battle has continued, and she was ferocious in that fight because she did want the public to know. She wanted that information disclosed. Similarly, there's a wealth of information that the government is sitting on right now that could be disclosed that tells the tale of how this atrocious sex trafficking operation existed for so long and how so many people were involved. And that has been kept under wraps. So her mission was really to disclose all of that. And we continue that work in her honor.
I believe Hallie asked the family this. I want to ask you this, too, and I'm asking this purely as a factual question. Did Virginia Giuffre ever talk about Donald Trump at all in the years that you knew her, and talking about her experiences either at Mar-a-Lago or with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell?
Only in reference to, her work at Mar-a-Lago. He was not a central figure in her story, certainly. And she has talked very openly about what happened to her and who was around during that time. And certainly that's what she really wants exposed, are all the bad actors who were around, who turned a blind eye to what was happening. And I think that's why it's so critically important that the government continues the work in trying to uncover the information that is being held in different jurisdictions, whether it's through the grand jury, whether it's through the general investigation files that the FBI and DOJ has, whether it's through the various civil cases, to really disclose what happened here, who was involved, whether money was being exchanged and to whom. All of those things need to be disclosed so that the public can know what actually happened here.
As someone who a large part of your career has been focused on this story and your representations of Ms. Giuffre, what has it been like to watch this story come roaring back to life in some ways, and seem to be headed possibly towards, the possibility of clemency or a pardon for one of the only two people ever been convicted?
Well, certainly, I've lived this journey with Virginia and other survivors for over 10 years now. And the accomplishments that those women together made by putting these individuals in prison were so significant and really, honored their suffering in many ways. So to have this new dialogue about the government giving Ghislaine Maxwell some kind of microphone to talk is incredibly upsetting to the survivors. Of course, this is a woman who lied under oath repeatedly, over and over and over again in the deposition I took of her. Yet the government's going to credit her statements. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the real information that needs to come out is in the documents. So I'm hopeful that the government will take a step back and look at that and think about that more clearly and do the right thing.
Final question for you. We've obviously seen a number of high-profile stories over the last decade or so about women who were victims of sexual abuse, sexual trafficking, sexual assault, and a real sort of intense cultural conversation about how survivors are treated, how they're treated by the legal system, by the media, by society, whether they're believed. And I wonder whether you think we've made progress in the decade that you've been following this, given where we are now, or whether it feels to you like less has been made than maybe we think.
It's a really great question and a very fair question. I mean, I will tell you, when I first started representing Virginia in 2015, the press, the government, everyone, nobody believed survivors. They were not to be believed. And it really took that shift in the 2017 timeframe where, very famous women who had been assaulted were coming forward and speaking their truth. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is a walking back of some of that progress. It's really disheartening. Survivors need to be believed. They need to be heard. They're not lying about what happened to them. They're speaking their truth. So as a society, we have to do a much better job at listening and a much better job at crediting their accounts.